There is a truth about human nature that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. It is uncomfortable. It is unsettling. And once you see it clearly, the world will never look the same again. Because beneath the polite conversations, the friendly smiles, and the social rules that hold society together, something far more ancient is constantly operating. A quiet competition, a hidden struggle for influence, power, security, and survival. Most people pretend this struggle does not exist. They believe the world runs on fairness. They believe kindness automatically earns loyalty. They believe honesty guarantees respect. But history tells a very different story, and few thinkers understood this reality more clearly than Niccolò Machiavelli. For centuries, his name has been associated with manipulation, strategy, and ruthless intelligence. But Machiavelli was not simply describing cruelty. He was describing human nature as it truly is, not as people wish it to be. While many philosophers try to imagine an ideal world, Machiavelli studied the real one, a world where alliances shift overnight, where loyalty often depends on advantage, where power rarely belongs to the most moral person. Instead, power belongs to the one who understands the game. This understanding became the foundation of Machiavelli's most famous work, The Prince, a book that shocked readers across Europe. Some called it dangerous, some called it immoral, but others recognized something else entirely. They saw it as one of the most honest examinations of human behavior ever written. Because Machiavelli was not trying to make people cynical, he was trying to make them aware. Aware of the instincts that drive human decisions, aware of the hidden motives behind public actions, aware of the fragile balance between morality and survival. And through years of observation in the dangerous, political world of Renaissance Italy, Machiavelli uncovered several truths about human nature that remain just as relevant today. These truths are not pleasant, but they explain why certain individuals rise to power, while others remain powerless, why some leaders maintain control while others fall quickly, why good intentions alone rarely protect anyone from manipulation. These are the brutal truths about human nature, truths most people sense deep down but rarely articulate. Truths that shape the behavior of individuals, organizations, and entire nations. And once you understand them, the patterns of human behavior begin to reveal themselves everywhere. In politics, in workplaces, in friendships, in families, and even in the quiet moments when people believe no one is watching. To understand these truths, we must first return to the world that shaped Machiavelli's thinking, Renaissance Italy. A place of extraordinary beauty, art, and intellectual discovery, but also a place of constant danger. City-states competed for power, families betrayed one another for influence, leaders rose quickly and fell even faster. Florence, the city where Machiavelli lived, was a center of culture and ambition. But beneath its elegance was an environment of relentless political tension. Machiavelli served as a diplomat for the Florentine Republic. This role placed him in direct contact with rulers, generals, and powerful families across Italy. He observed them carefully. He studied how they gained loyalty, how they inspired fear, how they manipulated perception. And over time, he realized something fascinating. The people who understood human nature survived. The people who ignored it were destroyed. One of the most influential figures Machiavelli observed was a man whose name still echoes through history, Cesare Borgia. Borgia was ambitious, intelligent, and ruthless when necessary. But what fascinated Machiavelli was not Borgia's cruelty. It was his understanding of psychology. Borgia seemed to know exactly how people would react to power, fear, loyalty, and opportunity. He did not rely on hope. He relied on strategy. And Machiavelli watched closely, because in Borgia's rise to power, he saw a living demonstration of the hidden rules that govern human behavior. Rules most people ignore, but rules that determine who wins and who loses in the real world. Through these observations, Machiavelli identified several brutal truths about human nature, truths that explain why people follow certain leaders, why loyalty disappears under pressure, why fear can sometimes be more reliable than love, and why those who refuse to understand these realities often become victims of those who do. The first brutal truth Machiavelli recognized as perhaps the most difficult for people to accept, because it challenges the comforting belief that goodness alone protects us. The truth is this: human beings are not naturally loyal. They are loyal when it benefits them. This does not mean loyalty never exists. It means loyalty is fragile, conditional, and easily influenced by circumstances. Machiavelli saw this pattern repeatedly during his diplomatic missions. Alliances formed quickly, but they dissolved just as quickly when political winds changed. Friends became enemies, enemies became allies. Promises were made with confidence and broken without hesitation. To many observers, this seemed shocking, but Machiavelli was not surprised, because he understood something about human nature. People are driven primarily by self-interest, security, opportunity, advantage. When loyalty aligns with these motivations, it appears strong. But when loyalty threatens these motivations, it begins to disappear. This realization did not make Machiavelli hate humanity. Instead, it made him realistic. He understood that wise leaders must build systems that account for human nature, rather than ignore it. A ruler who relies entirely on loyalty is vulnerable, but a ruler who understands the motivations behind loyalty can guide it. This was one of Machiavelli's most important lessons. Human behavior becomes predictable once you understand what people truly value. And this leads us to the deeper insight behind all 7 brutal truths. Human beings are not purely rational creatures. They are emotional, ambitious, fearful, hopeful, and often contradictory. They want security, but also freedom. They want fairness, but also advantage. They want strong leaders, but dislike strict control. Navigating these contradictions requires psychological awareness. And that awareness is exactly what Machiavelli tried to teach. Because ignoring human nature does not make it disappear. It simply makes you blind to it. And blindness in a competitive world is dangerous. The people who succeed in complex environments are rarely the most idealistic. They are the most perceptive. They see the patterns others ignore. They anticipate the reactions others fail to predict. And they prepare for outcomes others believe are impossible. This ability to observe human behavior honestly was Machiavelli's greatest strength, and it allowed him to uncover the brutal truths that continue to shape power and influence today. But these truths are not meant to make you cynical. They are meant to make you aware, because once you understand the real motivations behind human actions, you become far less vulnerable to manipulation. You stop expecting perfection from imperfect people. You stop assuming loyalty will exist without incentives. You stop believing that morality alone will protect you. Instead, you begin to see the world as it truly is: complex, strategic, and filled with individuals pursuing their own interests. And strangely enough, this clarity does not weaken morality. It strengthens it, because morality guided by awareness is far more powerful than morality guided by illusion. In the next part of this exploration, we will uncover the first of Machiavelli's brutal truths in greater depth. A truth that explains why people follow strong leaders even when those leaders are feared. A truth that reveals one of the most powerful forces in human psychology: fear. And why Machiavelli believed that anyone who wishes to understand power must first understand how fear shapes human behavior. Fear. It is one of the oldest forces shaping human behavior. Long before laws, governments, or moral philosophies existed, fear guided the decisions of human beings trying to survive in an uncertain world. Fear protected them from danger. Fear made them cautious. Fear made them obey authority. And according to Niccolò Machiavelli, fear also explains why power in human societies works the way it does. One of the most controversial ideas Machiavelli ever expressed was a simple but uncomfortable question: is it better for a leader to be loved or feared? Most people instinctively answer this question with the same response: loved. Because love sounds noble, love sounds moral, love feels safe. But Machiavelli's answer was different. He believed that while it is ideal for a leader to be both loved and feared, if forced to choose between the two, it is safer to be feared. This statement shocked readers for centuries, but Machiavelli was not celebrating cruelty. He was simply describing the way human psychology actually behaves under pressure. Love is powerful, but love is fragile. It depends on emotions. It depends on gratitude. It depends on personal connection. And emotions can change quickly. A person who loves you today may resent you tomorrow, but fear works differently. Fear is rooted in survival instinct. It creates boundaries. It discourages betrayal. And most importantly, fear does not rely on personal affection. This does not mean fear should become cruelty. In fact, Machiavelli warned leaders about something extremely important. Fear becomes dangerous when it turns into hatred. A ruler who is feared but respected maintains stability, but a ruler who is hated invites rebellion. This delicate balance fascinated Machiavelli because it revealed something deeper about human nature. Human beings respect strength, even when they do not like it. History provides countless examples of this psychological pattern. Powerful leaders who maintained order often commanded obedience even from those who disagreed with them, not because people loved them, but because people understood the consequences of defying them, and Machiavelli observed this dynamic closely through the rise of one of the most fascinating political figures of the Renaissance, Cesare Borgia. Borgia governed territories that had long suffered from chaos, corruption, and violence. Bandits roamed freely. Local officials abused power. Lawlessness had become normal. To restore order, Borgia appointed a man named Ramiro de Orco to govern the region with absolute authority. De Orco was ruthless. He punished criminals harshly. He crushed corruption. And within a short time, the region that had once been chaotic became stable. Order returned, but the methods used to achieve this stability created fear among the population. Eventually, Borgia made a shocking decision. He had De Orco publicly executed and displayed in the town square. To many observers, this seemed like betrayal, but Machiavelli saw something else. He saw strategy. By allowing De Orco to enforce harsh discipline, Borgia restored order. But by later punishing him publicly, Borgia shifted the anger of the population away from himself. The people saw Borgia as a leader who removed cruelty rather than caused it. In one calculated move, Borgia preserved both fear and public approval. Machiavelli admired the psychological precision of this act because it revealed how carefully power must manage perception. The truth was simple. Human beings judge leaders not only by their actions, but by the story surrounding those actions, and that story can be shaped. Which leads to the second brutal truth about human nature. People judge appearances more than reality. Most individuals believe they evaluate the world objectively. They assume their judgments are based on facts. But Machiavelli understood that human perception is far more emotional than rational. People see what they expect to see. They believe what fits their existing beliefs. They trust appearances that confirm their hopes or fears. Because of this, reputation often becomes more powerful than truth. A leader who appears strong will often be treated as strong. A leader who appears confident will inspire confidence, even when reality is far more complicated. This is why Machiavelli advised rulers to carefully manage their public image. He wrote that people judge more with their eyes than with their hands, meaning most people never examine reality deeply. They rely on visible signals, symbols of power, displays of confidence, public gestures of generosity or justice. These signals shape perception, and perception shapes loyalty. Modern psychology confirms what Machiavelli observed centuries ago. Human beings constantly form impressions based on limited information. First impressions, facial expressions, tone of voice, social status, clothing, body language. These small signals influence how trustworthy or powerful someone appears. And once that perception forms, it becomes difficult to change. Machiavelli understood that wise leaders must control this process. Because if you do not shape your own image, others will shape it for you. Reputation becomes a shield. It protects authority. It discourages challenges. It influences how others behave before any conflict even begins. This principle applies far beyond politics. In business, in social relationships, in leadership, people often respond more to perceived strength than actual strength. A confident presence can stop challenges before they start. But visible weakness invites pressure. This is why Machiavelli warned against appearing indecisive or fragile. Even if a leader feels uncertain internally, projecting stability can preserve order externally. Again, this is not about deception for selfish reasons. It is about understanding how human psychology operates. People seek stability. They follow individuals who appear capable of providing it. And when uncertainty rises, they look for visible signs of authority. The leaders who understand this dynamic can guide perception. The leaders who ignore it often lose influence. Because human beings rarely evaluate situations purely through logic, they respond to emotion, to symbols, to confidence, and to fear. These forces shape decisions far more than most people realize. Machiavelli did not invent these forces. He simply observed them honestly, and by understanding them, he revealed a deeper pattern in human behavior. People often claim to value virtue, but they respond more strongly to strength and certainty. This does not mean virtue has no place in leadership. It means virtue must be supported by awareness, because good intentions alone cannot control human perception. And leaders who ignore this reality often discover something painful. The world rewards those who understand human nature, not those who deny it. But the third brutal truth Machiavelli discovered may be even more unsettling, because it explains why people often turn against those who help them the most. A truth rooted in one of the most powerful human emotions, ambition, and how ambition can quietly transform loyalty into rivalry. Ambition, it is one of the most powerful forces driving human behavior, quietly, constantly, shaping decisions in ways most people barely notice. Ambition pushes individuals to improve their lives. It motivates invention, discovery, and progress. But ambition also carries a darker side, because the same desire that inspires greatness can also awaken rivalry, jealousy, and betrayal. And this is the third brutal truth about human nature that Niccolò Machiavelli observed repeatedly throughout his life. Human beings are naturally envious of those above them. This envy rarely announces itself openly. Few people will openly admit that they resent someone else's success. Instead, it appears in subtle ways. A quiet discomfort when someone rises too quickly. A suspicion that their achievements must be undeserved. A desire to see them humbled. Machiavelli noticed that power does not simply attract loyalty, it also attracts resentment. The moment an individual begins to rise above others, two groups quietly begin to form around them. Those who hope to benefit from their success, and those who secretly wish to see them fall. This pattern has repeated throughout history. Kings feared their generals. Generals feared their advisors. Advisors feared ambitious rivals. Because success changes relationships, a friend who once felt equal may suddenly feel inferior. And when that shift happens, admiration can transform into competition. Machiavelli understood this psychological shift better than most. He saw it clearly while observing the turbulent, political world of Renaissance Italy. City-states were constantly struggling for influence. Families competed for dominance. Political alliances formed and dissolved with shocking speed. And often the most dangerous threats too. Powerful leaders did not come from obvious enemies. They came from those who once stood closest to them. Because proximity to power creates temptation. The closer someone stands to influence, the easier it becomes to imagine taking that influence for themselves. This is why Machiavelli warned leaders to remain cautious even among allies. Not because everyone is treacherous, but because human ambition is unpredictable. People rarely begin their journey with betrayal in mind. But circumstances change. Opportunities appear, and ambition whispers new possibilities. A loyal supporter, may slowly begin to imagine a future where they no longer serve another leader, but become the leader themselves. This is not always malicious. It is simply part of human nature. People want recognition. People want influence. People want advancement. And when they see someone standing above them, their minds naturally begin comparing, why him? Why not me? This quiet question has toppled empires because envy is rarely satisfied. It constantly measures, constantly calculates, constantly searches for moments of weakness. Machiavelli believed wise leaders must understand this psychological reality. They must reward loyalty but remain aware of ambition. They must encourage talent but prevent any single rival from becoming too powerful, because when ambition grows unchecked, loyalty can quickly dissolve. And this leads to another uncomfortable truth Machiavelli recognized about human nature: gratitude does not last as long as people believe. This is the fourth brutal truth. Gratitude fades quickly when circumstances change. Human beings are capable of genuine appreciation. When someone helps us during a difficult moment, we feel thankful. When someone offers us an opportunity, we feel loyalty. But gratitude has a strange weakness. It fades with time, and it fades even faster when new interests appear. Machiavelli saw this pattern repeatedly during political negotiations. A ruler might receive support from an ally during a crisis. Promises of loyalty would be exchanged. Oaths of friendship declared. But once the crisis passed, the alliance often began to weaken. Why? Because human priorities had shifted. The urgent need that created the alliance was gone. New interests emerged. New opportunities appeared. And slowly, gratitude lost its influence. This did not mean people were inherently evil. It meant their attention naturally moves toward present concerns rather than past favors. Machiavelli wrote that people quickly forget the generosity that once benefited them, but they rarely forget injuries. A favor can fade from memory, but a humiliation can remain for years. This psychological imbalance fascinated Machiavelli because it revealed how emotional memory shapes loyalty. People remember what hurt them far more vividly than what helped them, which means a leader who grants many favors can still lose support if they commit a single public mistake. The mind magnifies negative experiences, and this magnification shapes reputation. Modern psychology confirms this pattern. Human brains are wired to prioritize threats and negative experiences. This survival instinct once helped our ancestors remain alert to danger. But in social environments, it creates an unusual imbalance. People may receive years of support from someone, but a single betrayal or disappointment can suddenly overshadow everything that came before. Machiavelli believed leaders must accept this reality rather than fight it. Instead of relying on past gratitude, they must continuously reinforce loyalty through present incentives, because loyalty that depends only on memory is fragile. Loyalty that depends on ongoing benefit is stronger. This may sound cynical at first, but Machiavelli was not encouraging manipulation. He was describing the psychological conditions that maintain stability. Human beings respond to incentives, security, opportunity, respect. When these needs are met, loyalty remains strong. When these needs disappear, loyalty weakens. Understanding this pattern allows leaders to maintain balance. Ignoring it invites disappointment, because expecting permanent gratitude from human beings is like expecting the weather to remain the same forever. It is simply not how nature works. But perhaps the most unsettling truth Machiavelli discovered about human nature lies even deeper. A truth that explains why people sometimes support actions they once claimed to oppose. Why individuals can change sides in conflicts. Why moral certainty often collapses under pressure. This is the fifth brutal truth. Human beings adapt their beliefs to protect their interests, meaning people often reshape their principles when circumstances demand it. This does not always happen consciously. In fact, many people genuinely believe they remain consistent, but the mind is remarkably skilled at justifying change. When survival or advantage becomes important enough, new explanations begin to appear, new interpretations of old beliefs, new arguments supporting actions that once seemed unacceptable. Machiavelli observed this flexibility in politics constantly. A leader might condemn a rival's actions one year, then perform similar actions the next year while claiming they were necessary. Supporters who once criticized those tactics suddenly defended them, not because they were hypocrites, but because their interests had changed. And the human mind is extremely good at adjusting moral reasoning to match new interests. This realization helped Machiavelli understand something critical about leadership. People want to believe they are moral, but they also want to succeed. When these two desires collide, the mind often chooses success and then rewrites morality to justify it. This psychological mechanism explains many contradictions in human behavior. Why people criticize actions in others but excuse the same actions in themselves. Why groups defend their own mistakes while condemning identical mistakes from rivals. Why moral standards appear flexible depending on who benefits from them. Machiavelli did not celebrate this tendency. He simply recognized it. And once he recognized it, the patterns of human behavior became far easier to predict. Because beneath ideology, beneath rhetoric, beneath moral arguments, one question often determines decisions. Who benefits? When you understand that question, the motives behind many human actions become clearer. And Machiavelli believed leaders must understand these motives if they hope to guide societies effectively. Because ignoring human nature does not eliminate it. It simply blinds you to its influence. And blindness is dangerous in a world shaped by ambition, fear, loyalty, and perception. But even these brutal truths do not complete the full picture, because Machiavelli discovered two final insights about human nature that are, perhaps, the most revealing of all. Truths that explain why stability is so difficult to maintain, and why power constantly shifts from one individual to another. Truths that reveal something fundamental about the restless nature of human desire. And once these final truths are understood, the entire structure of Machiavelli's philosophy becomes clear, not as a celebration of cruelty, but as a warning about what happens when people misunderstand the forces that shape human behavior, and how those who understand these forces gain an enormous advantage in a complex world. Human desire is restless. No matter how much stability a society achieves, no matter how much power a leader accumulates, the human mind continues searching for advantage, recognition, and security. This restless energy drives progress, but it also creates endless tension within every human system. And this leads to the sixth brutal truth about human nature that Niccolò Machiavelli recognized through years of observing power and politics. Human beings respect strength more than kindness. This idea often makes people uncomfortable, because kindness is one of the virtues most societies claim to admire. From childhood, people are taught that compassion and fairness are the highest forms of behavior. And in many ways, that teaching is valuable. Kindness builds cooperation. It builds trust. It allows communities to function peacefully. But Machiavelli noticed something that many people prefer not to acknowledge. Kindness alone rarely protects authority. When kindness appears without strength, it is often interpreted as weakness, and weakness invites pressure. Individuals, groups, and even nations instinctively test limits when they sense vulnerability. They push boundaries. They challenge authority. They look for opportunities to gain advantage. This does not always happen consciously. It is often an instinctive response embedded deep in human psychology. People want security. They want protection from chaos and instability. And when they evaluate leaders, they often look for signals of strength, confidence, decisiveness, control. A leader who displays these qualities appears capable of maintaining order. A leader who appears uncertain creates anxiety. This is why Machiavelli believed that kindness must always be balanced with authority. A leader can be generous. A leader can be compassionate. But if those qualities are not supported by visible strength, they can as easily be exploited. History offers countless examples of this pattern. Leaders who tried to rule purely through goodwill often struggled to maintain control, but leaders who demonstrated firm authority while maintaining fairness often commanded lasting respect, because people feel safer under leadership that appears strong enough to protect them. Machiavelli did not reject kindness. He simply believed that kindness without power is fragile. Power without kindness is dangerous. But the balance between the two creates stability, and maintaining that balance requires a deep understanding of human psychology, because human beings constantly evaluate strength. Even in everyday interactions, in workplaces, in negotiations, in friendships, confidence influences how others respond. Authority shapes expectations, and individuals who appear capable of defending their boundaries often receive more respect than those who avoid confrontation entirely. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of Machiavelli's philosophy. He was not encouraging cruelty. He was encouraging awareness. Awareness that human beings instinctively respect strength, because strength represents security. But the final brutal truth Machiavelli discovered may be the most revealing of all, because it explains why power is never truly permanent. The seventh brutal truth is simple: power always attracts opposition. The moment an individual rises above others, resistance begins to form, sometimes quietly, sometimes openly, but almost always inevitably. Success creates visibility. Visibility creates scrutiny, and scrutiny often leads to rivalry. Those who feel excluded from power begin searching for ways to challenge it. Those who feel threatened by influence begin forming alliances against it. This pattern repeats across every level of human society: in politics, in corporations, in social groups, in history's greatest empires. Power rarely disappears peacefully. It is contested, constantly. Machiavelli understood this dynamic because he lived through it. During his lifetime, Florence experienced political upheaval that dramatically altered his own life. The republic he once served collapsed. A powerful family returned to rule the city, and Machiavelli himself was removed from office, imprisoned, and accused of conspiracy. For a time, the man who had spent years studying power suddenly found himself powerless. But even during this difficult period, Machiavelli continued observing the forces shaping human behavior. He saw how quickly political alliances changed, how former friends became enemies, how the struggle for influence never truly ended. And it was during this period of reflection that he wrote the book that would make his name famous across the world, The Prince. A book not meant to celebrate manipulation, but meant to reveal the reality of human nature. Many readers misunderstood Machiavelli. They believed he was encouraging leaders to abandon morality, but Machiavelli's deeper message was something far more complex. He believed that ignoring human nature creates vulnerability. Leaders who assume everyone will behave morally often become victims of those who do not share the same assumptions. But leaders who understand human psychology can navigate these realities more effectively, because they are not surprised by ambition. They are not shocked by rivalry. They are not blinded by appearances. Instead, they observe, they anticipate, they prepare. This awareness does not require abandoning morality. In fact, it can strengthen moral choices, because morality, guided by clear understanding, becomes far more resilient than morality based on naive expectations. When people understand the darker tendencies within human nature, they become better equipped to resist them. They recognize manipulation earlier. They set stronger boundaries. They make wiser decisions about trust. And perhaps most importantly, they develop a deeper understanding of the world around them. This is the true legacy of Niccolò Machiavelli. Not cruelty, not cynicism, but clarity. Clarity about the forces that shape human behavior. Clarity about the relationship between power and perception. Clarity about the fragile balance between morality and survival. The 7 brutal truths about human nature are not meant to destroy hope, They are meant to remove illusions, because illusions create vulnerability, but awareness creates strength. Once you understand these truths, you begin to see patterns everywhere. You recognize the motivations behind decisions. You see how ambition shapes alliances. You see how perception shapes authority. And you understand why the struggle for power never truly disappears. Human nature has remained remarkably consistent throughout history. Technology changes. Societies evolve. But the fundamental instincts driving human behavior remain the same. Fear, ambition, desire, recognition, security. These forces shaped the world Machiavelli observed centuries ago, and they continue shaping the world today. Which raises an important question. What should we do with this knowledge? Should we become cynical? Should we assume everyone is driven purely by self-interest? Machiavelli's answer would likely be different. Understanding human nature does not require abandoning humanity. It simply means recognizing reality. Because when people understand the darker sides of human behavior, they gain the power to navigate them wisely. They become harder to manipulate, harder to deceive, harder to control, and that awareness creates something extremely powerful. Freedom. The freedom to see the world clearly, the freedom to make strategic decisions, the freedom to remain moral without being naive. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson Machiavelli left behind. Human nature contains both light and darkness. Ignoring the darkness does not make it disappear, but understanding it allows you to navigate the world with intelligence, awareness, and strength. And once that understanding takes root, the patterns of power that once seemed mysterious begin to make perfect sense, because the game of human nature has always followed the same rules. Most people simply never learned how to see them.